Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. Today, we have an exciting topic to discuss: how to learn and memorize everything while learning English. It's something everyone struggles with at one point or another, whether you're just starting or have been learning for a while. We'll explore practical techniques, scientific insights, and tips to make memorization easier and more efficient.
That's right, Sarah. Learning a new language is all about mastering new words, phrases, and structures. But with so much to remember, it can feel overwhelming. So, today, we'll share strategies that can help your brain retain all that information and make your English journey a lot easier.
Let's start by discussing why memorization is so important when learning English. Every new word or phrase is like a little piece of a puzzle that helps you communicate. If you don't remember those words, you won't be able to build your sentences or express yourself fully.
Exactly. And the key to learning a language isn't just about memorizing vocabulary. It's about connecting that vocabulary with real-life contexts, so your brain can recall and use it naturally. So, how do we help our brains retain this new language material?
First, let's look at the science behind memorization. You might have heard of short-term and long-term memory. When we first learn something, it goes into our short-term memory. But if we don't review it, it fades away. The trick is to move that information from short-term to long-term memory. And how do we do that?
Repetition is key. Repeating what you've learned at spaced intervals is one of the most powerful ways to ensure information sticks. This is known as spaced repetition, and it's a technique many successful language learners swear by.
Exactly. So, don't cram everything in one go. Instead, review the material periodically, starting with a quick review soon after you first encounter it, then spacing out your reviews over days, weeks, and months.
Now, let's talk about the difference between active and passive learning. Passive learning is when you just listen or read without engaging with the material. It's kind of like watching TV in English without really paying attention. It helps a little, but it doesn't stick as well.
On the other hand, active learning is when you engage directly with the material. For example, you can write sentences with the new vocabulary, speak out loud, or even teach the word to someone else. When you make an effort to use new words, your brain works harder to remember them.
Exactly. Active learning also involves testing yourself. It can be as simple as reviewing flashcards, practicing a dialogue, or speaking with a language partner. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to recall what you've learned.
Let's dive into some specific techniques for memorizing vocabulary. One common method is using flashcards. You can create physical flashcards or use apps like Anki or Quizlet. The key with flashcards is to use them regularly and with spaced repetition.
Another technique is creating associations or stories around new words. For example, let's say you're learning the word apple. Instead of just memorizing the word, imagine an apple tree in your backyard, or picture yourself eating a delicious apple. Creating a visual or emotional connection helps your brain remember it better.
Mnemonics are also a powerful tool. For example, to remember the word abandon, you might think of the phrase "a band on the run" to remind you that it means to leave something behind.
Now, vocabulary is important, but grammar is the skeleton of the language. Learning grammar rules can feel like a chore, but they're essential for structuring your thoughts and sentences. The best way to memorize grammar is through practice.
Exactly, Michael. Grammar can be tricky because it's not just about memorizing rules. It's about understanding how they work in real-world contexts. For example, instead of just memorizing the past tense forms of verbs, practice using them in sentences. For instance, I went to the store yesterday. Over time, your brain will naturally get used to the structure.
Context is everything. You might learn the present perfect tense by using it in real-life situations, like, I've been to London. The more you speak and listen, the more natural these structures will feel.
Let's talk about listening and speaking. Many learners focus too much on reading and writing, but listening and speaking are just as important. The more you hear English, the more familiar you become with the rhythm and flow of the language.
And speaking is where you get to put everything together. When you practice speaking, you'll find that you remember words and structures better because you're actively using them. And don't worry about making mistakes. Making mistakes is part of the learning process.
Learning English, like any skill, requires motivation and consistency. There will be days when you feel stuck, and that's normal. The key is to stay consistent and make learning a part of your daily routine.
One trick is to set small, achievable goals. Maybe you want to learn 5 new words every day or finish a chapter in your grammar book. It's about building momentum, and those small wins add up over time.
And celebrate your progress. Even small achievements deserve recognition. Maybe take a moment to reflect on how much you've learned over the past month. This can keep you motivated.
For those of you who are looking to take your memorization skills to the next level, let's talk about some advanced techniques. One popular method is the method of loci, also known as the memory palace. It involves visualizing a familiar place, like your home, and associating pieces of information with specific locations within it.
This method works because your brain is really good at remembering spaces and locations. By attaching new words or phrases to these locations, you create a visual map that makes it easier to retrieve the information later.
Another advanced technique is chunking. This involves grouping information into larger, more manageable units. For example, when you learn a new sentence, don't memorize it word by word. Instead, memorize it as a chunk. I've never seen this movie before.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about staying motivated and overcoming the inevitable challenges that come with learning a new language. It's common to feel frustrated or discouraged at times, especially when things aren't clicking right away.
Absolutely, but remember that learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. Set realistic expectations and be kind to yourself. Celebrate your progress, even if it feels small. And don't compare your journey to anyone else's. Everyone learns at their own pace.
So, to summarize, effective memorization in language learning involves repetition, active learning, creating associations, and practicing grammar and vocabulary in real-world contexts. The more you immerse yourself in English and the more you actively engage with the language, the easier it will be to memorize and recall everything.
And remember, motivation and consistency are key. Don't be afraid to experiment with different memorization techniques and find what works best for you. Stay patient, stay consistent, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope these tips help you on your English learning journey. Keep practicing, and we'll see you next time.